Hello, and welcome to another session in our teaching series, Hidden Facts in Biology. We're still taking the respiratory system, and we are going to be looking at the respiratory system in mammals. Land animals exposed to the atmosphere have dry body coverings, and as such, gaseous exchange cannot occur through such surfaces because they are dry. As a result of these animals have evolved a suitable respiratory structure. Mammals actually have the most complex respiratory system, with the main gaseous exchange organs being a pair of lungs enclosed in the thorax and connected to the outside by a series of branch tubes and pathway. We are going to be taking the respiratory system of man as a typical example for that of mammals, and that is because the respiratory system of man is typical of the respiratory system of mammals in general. So I'll show you the diagram, and with the diagram we'll talk about the respiratory system in mammals. So this is the diagram of the human respiratory system. Like we have always said over and over, if you are asked to draw this diagram in an exam condition, you should make sure that you do not shade in drawing your diagrams. There should be a title, like the title of this diagram, which says the human respiratory system. And when you are labeling, you should make sure that your labeling do not cross each other. So now let's talk about the diagram we have in front of us. It's all about the respiratory system of man. So the first thing we see there is the nasal cavity. The cavity is like an opening, and nasal means nose. So what the nasal cavity simply means is the nose opening, or which is also known as the nostril. What the nostril leads to is that it leads into the posterior portion of the mouth cavity, which is called the pharynx. So we see the label of the pharynx there, and this pharynx leads into the voice box or larynx. So that is the larynx, and this larynx leads into the windpipe or trachea. So there is a flat piece of tissue there, which is known as the epiglottis. This epiglottis, it covers the entrance to the larynx, and it also covers the entrance to a structure known as the trachea when food is swallowed into the esophagus, which lies behind the trachea. So this trachea, it branches, and when it branches, it gives rise to the two bronchi. In singular, this is known as the bronchus. So we see the bronchus there, and these bronchus, they lead to the lung, where they later branch into small tubes called the bronchiole. So that is the bronchiole there, and this bronchiole, they lead to numerous air sacs called the alveoli, and these alveoli are richly supplied with blood capillaries, and they are sites or surfaces where gaseous exchange take place. So this is all about the respiratory system of human. This alveoli, it actually communicates with the atmosphere through continuous air passage leading from them to the bronchioles, bronchi, trachea, larynx, pharynx, and nostril. So this is all about the respiratory system in man. So I will talk about this diagram. We are going to be looking at the components of the respiratory system in mammals, and we'll discuss them individually again. So the components of the respiratory system in mammals include the following. Number one, the nose. We have the pharynx. We have the larynx, also known as the voice box. There's the trachea. So we have the bronchi, and we have the lungs. Though we have discussed this before in the diagram, but we'll be looking at them in more detail now. First of all, we'll talk about the nose and the mouth. The nose has two air passages called nostrils, and the lining of the nostrils, they secrete mucus which helps to keep them moist. The nostrils also have hairs for filtering air. The function of the nose and mouth is that they help to warm and moisten incoming air. Let's take a look at the pharynx. The pharynx continues from the mouth and the nose, and it leads to the esophagus, which is also known as the gullet, and the larynx, which is known as the voice box. Food goes into the gullet, that is the esophagus, while air goes into the trachea. The entrance into the lungs has flap of tissue called the epiglottis. This closes the opening, which is known as the glottis, when the individual is eating, thus preventing particles of food from falling into the trachea and causing fits of cough. The next thing we will talk about is the larynx or voice box. The larynx or voice box is short and it's composed of strong cartilage. The function of the larynx is that air enters the trachea through the larynx. That is, it's a passageway for air to get to the trachea. Next, we will talk about the bronchi. Bronchi are made up of rings and cartilages, and these bronchioles in turn lead into air sacs. And this air sac is made up of a cluster of alveoli. The walls of the air sacs are very thin and elastic, and through these thin walls, exchange of gases takes place between the air sac and capillaries. Next thing we are going to be talking about is the lungs. The lungs are spongy, consisting mainly of bronchioles, air sacs, network of blood vessels, and capillaries bound together by connective tissue. So now let's look at the extent of the lungs. The lungs occupy the thoracic cavity from the shoulder to the diaphragm, except the area that is being occupied by the trachea, the gullet, the blood vessels, and the heart. Each lung is surrounded by a membrane that is elastic in nature, and this membrane is known as the pleural membrane. The function of this elastic membrane is to enable it to stretch. So now have a look at the different components of respiratory system in man, or in mama as to say. The next thing we will be talking about is the mechanism of breathing in man. What are the mechanism of breathing in man, or what is the mechanism of breathing in man? Breathing is such that it occurs in two phases, and these two phases are called, number one, the phase of inhalation, which is also known as breathing in, and the phase of exhalation, which is known as breathing out. These two events occurs as a result of the movement of the ribs, the diaphragm, the sternum, and the intercostal muscles. Let's look at these two phases individually. First of all, we'll talk about the phase of inhalation. We make mention of the fact that inhalation means breathing in. It is actually the breathing in of oxygen. Another word for it is inspiration or inspiration. During inspiration, the thoracic cavity increases in volume. The diaphragm contracts and becomes flattened. Intercostal muscles, they contract while the ribs move upwards and outwards. As the sternum projects forward, there will be an increase in the volume and a decrease in the pressure of the thoracic cavity. This will lead to air to be forced from outside into the lungs through the air passage, and the air passage include the nose, the trachea, the bronchus, and the bronchioles. This is all about the phase of inhalation. Now let's talk about the phase of exhalation. This is also known as expiration, and like we mentioned before, it simply means breathing out. It is the breathing out of air, that is carbon dioxide and water vapor, into the atmosphere. What happens in the phase of expiration? In expiration, the following events occur. This is in contrast with the phase of inhalation, where the intercostal muscle contracts and the ribs moving upwards. The next event that occurs is that the diaphragm relaxes and returns to its original position, which is the dome-shaped position. The next thing that happens is that the thoracic cavity volume decreases while the lungs shrink, and then the lung air pressure increases, and a lot of air is expelled from the lungs through the air passage. It is also important for you to know that each alveolus is covered by a film of moisture. That is, a film of moisture covers the lining of each alveolus. The oxygen concentration in the blood capillaries of the alveoli is less than that in the cavity of the alveoli, and as a result, oxygen in the air spaces of the alveoli dissolves in a film of moisture and diffuses where it readily combines. The capillaries form the pulmonary vein, which returns the oxygenated blood to the left auricle of the heart. From here, it is transported around the body. The oxygen is used in the body cells for respiration, whereas carbon dioxide, energy, and water are produced. What we just talked about right now is the fate of oxygen during inhalation and the fate of carbon dioxide. So what we have just spoken about briefly is that during inhalation, oxygen is being taken up by the body and is used in the body cells for respiration, and carbon dioxide and energy and water are produced, and this is always possible through the mechanism of breathing we have looked at. Now we are going to be talking about gaseous exchange in lower animals. In lower animals like amoeba, paramecium, and earthworm, diffusion occurs through membrane or body surface. Oxygen that dissolves in water diffuses into the body, while carbon dioxide goes out of the body through the entire body surface. The cell membrane acts as a respiratory surface. Gaseous exchange in unicellular organism is by diffusion. The earthworm is able to use its body surface because it has moist skin. This brings us to the end of the teaching session. Now we are going to be taking some questions, starting with the examples. Now go to the first example. Our first example says, rabbits cannot survive in an aquatic habitat because they have A, four and hind limbs, B, no gills, C, no fins, and D, no scales. The answer to this question is B. This is because rabbits cannot survive in an aquatic habitat because they have no gills. Gills are adapted for breathing underwater. The next question says, inhaled air is made warm and moist in the A, epiglottis, B, nasal cavity, C, trachea, and D, mouth. The answer to this question is B. This is because inhaled air is made warm and moist in the nasal cavity. The next question says, which of the following structures is not involved in respiration? A, lung books, B, mouth, C, stomach, D, trachea. The answer to the question is C, and this is because the stomach is not involved in respiration. It is a part of the digestive system. The next question says, which of the following statements about the diaphragm of a mammal is not correct? It A, separates the thorax and the abdomen, B, is a thick layer of muzzle, C, is made up of epithelial cells, D, is part of the human respiratory apparatus. The answer to this question is C, and this is because the diaphragm is not made up of epithelial cells. The diaphragm is actually a C-shaped structure of muscle and fibrous tissue. Hence, option C is not correct. That is why it is the answer to the question. The next question says, the exchange of gases between the environment and the respiratory organs of vertebrates is referred to as A, inhalation, B. Respiration, C. Expiration, and D. Breathing. From our discussion, we talk about the mechanism of respiration in man, and we also say that respiration is also known as the process of what? Breathing. And breathing involves inhalation, which means forcing air into the respiratory organ. It also involves exhalation, which means forcing air out of the respiratory organ. So this means our answer will be D, which is breathing. The next question, it says, which of the following actions does not occur during exhalation in man? A. Thoracic cavity decreases in volume. B. Diaphragm flattens. C. Ribs move downward and in. D. Air pressure increases in the thoracic cavity. The answer to this question is B. The diaphragm actually becomes dome-shaped during exhalation. It doesn't flatten. It is the process of inhalation that the diaphragm actually flattens. Our next question says, which of the following is the correct sequence of the part of the respiratory systems? A. Nursery to larynx to lungs to bronchus. B. Nursery to larynx to bronchus to trachea. C. Nursery to bronchus to trachea to larynx. D. Nursery to trachea to bronchus to lungs. E. Nursery to bronchus to lungs to trachea. The answer to this question is D. The sequence of the respiratory system is from nose or nursery to the trachea to the bronchus and to the lungs. That is the most correct answer. But in more detail, the exact sequence of the respiratory system is from the nose, that is the nursery, to the pharynx, which is the throat, to the larynx, which is the voice box, to the trachea, which is the windpipe, and to the bronchi, and then to the lungs. We have come to the end of the examples, and now we'll be taking the exercises. This exercise was taken from our book, Hidden Facts in Biology. You can see that in page 166 of the book, both in soft copy and hard copy. Try your hands on the question and also check the answer section of the book to check if you got the questions correctly. Thank you for listening.